Something even more exciting today. Since this is Video Friday, we also have a chance to see a video, and we can find the link for that, on just a general reason for databases. I know you're excited about them and you really want to work with them, but we want to make sure you have an understanding of why we use them and what they're all about. So I have this video here. If you're watching the recording, rather than record the video in this recording, which may be slightly illegal, I'm not sure. I'm going to give you the link right here. Watch that video and then come back. So I'm gonna pause the recording right now and
understand databases, and don't jump directly into the features of database software. First, go the other way.
He's got an English accent, so he knows what he's talking about.
To solve a problem. So what's the problem? Well, that might seem like an easy one. You have some data, some information. You, your company, your clients, or even the business that you want to create, there is some data you need to store. And this data could be anything. It could be information about customers, products, employees, orders, details about the visits to your website. This data could be in text format, could be names and descriptions, or numeric, amounts, or dates. Or this could be document files, or images, audio, or video. But here's the thing. You can already store data. You could just open up a text file and type your information into that, or open up a spreadsheet and do that too. If you've got documents, just organize them in folders. And many small businesses would start with something like this, with a spreadsheet. And a lot will continue like this for years. And that might be
it's like a customer database.
Because just having data is not a good enough reason to need a database. Having data is not the problem. The problem is what comes next. And there's a lot of potential problems, but I'll describe 6 of them without even getting technical. Size of your data is a potential problem. Ease of updating your data, accuracy of it, security of it, redundancy in it, importance of the data. Let's take these one by one. First, size. Because what starts off as a small amount of data has a tendency to turn into a large amount of data. And if your spreadsheet solution is nice and speedy when there's 100 lines in it, what happens when there's 2 million lines in it? And maybe you'd start to split that up into a bunch of different files, and then you hit a sub-problem, speed. How would you find anything? Next is the idea of ease of updating your data. What happens if 2 people need to edit this spreadsheet at the same time? How about 20 at the same time, or 200 people at the same time? If you work with a file-based system, it's just not going to happen. You'll end up with everybody overwriting everybody else's changes. Then there's accuracy of the data. Is there anything that would actually prevent me from typing incorrect data into a spreadsheet like this? To fat finger a date as being in the past when it should be in the future, or just missing some vital piece of information out with the intention that I'll come back to that and do it later. Well, usually there's nothing that would prevent me from doing so. So as these files get older and older, they start to fill up with data that isn't accurate, it isn't consistent, it isn't trustworthy anymore. And then there's the idea of security. Most of the time, you need to share this data, but just because it needs to be shared with someone doesn't mean it needs to be shared with everyone. Because some of this could be sensitive, it could be payroll information, healthcare information. So who would get to view it? And who would get to edit it? And if they do get to edit this data, is all we know just the last person who edited this file, or do we know who made every entry and every change at every point? Because with some information, healthcare, financial, there are laws in place to make sure you're auditing every alteration to sensitive data. And there's the idea of redundancy or duplication of your data, having multiple copies of the same data. Now, redundancy by itself is not a bad thing. With backups, it's good to have redundancy.
A jump drive, when the hard drive fails.
Not so good because it leads to conflicts. Maybe one file ends up with 2 entries for the same product. One says the product is $12, another says the product is $10. Which one's right? Or maybe that information is spread over a couple of different files, one owned by one department, one by another. Which one is true? And then there's importance of your data. You probably felt the pain of working in a spreadsheet or a word process where something happens, there's a crash or a disconnect, and you lose 5 minutes of work or an hour of work or a day. It's annoying, it's inconvenient. But if the information you just lost was yesterday's orders, or the allergies of a patient, or the details of a stock trade, or the seat allocation of a transatlantic flight someone just paid for, that's not inconvenient. That's unacceptable. The data is critical. With many companies, your data is your entire business. You can't lose any of it, not a single change. And you might have one of these problems, you might have all of these problems and more besides. But these are the reasons we need a database. These are the problems. It's not about providing somewhere to put your data. We could already do that. It's about allowing the data to grow and still be manageable, still be easy to get to everything. About letting it be easily updated, even by lots of people at the same time. About keeping it accurate and internally consistent. Keeping it secure and controlling access to it. Who gets to read it, who gets to edit it, and tracking exactly what they did and when they did it. It's about making sure that while your backups might be redundant, because that data is critical, your data itself is not. There is one version of the truth. But once you make a change to that data, you will never lose that change. You'll never lose that data. This is what a database can give us. Structure. It's not a place to put your data. It's a structured system to put your data in that imposes rules upon that data.
To manage your data.
Are yours. Because the importance of these things changes based on your needs. Maybe your main problem is size. You have terabytes of information. Then you'll have different priorities from someone who has much smaller amounts of data, but where every single change must be controlled, audited, and logged the moment that it's made. And this is why, if your experience is just using a database that someone else has made, you haven't seen what's important. It's totally forgivable that someone whose only time working with databases is using an old FileMaker or Microsoft Access database, that they think this is what a database is. It's like a spreadsheet, it's just more tedious to use. And that's not it at all. This is the true power of a database. It's invisible. It's the things you can't see that are going on in the background. The security, the enforced integrity of the data, the ability to get to it fast and get to it reliably. That it's robust, it can withstand lots of people at the same time and even correctly survive crashes and hardware issues without corrupting the data. And that's what we need to do here. Understand how to describe our structure and define those rules so all this invisible stuff will actually happen. Now, up to this point, I haven't gone into any particular database software or even any particular type of database.
Except you did mention Access.
And some of them are better at one or more of these problems. And we'll get there. But there's a couple more terms to cover before we do.
There you go. That's I thought it was pretty pretty well stated. Just the whole idea of why there are databases. And he mentioned Access kind of being like just a more tedious type of Excel. But remember, it's not just similar to Excel. It's giving you a taste of what databases are out there that are essentially like he said, they're invisible. When you go to websites and log in, it's invisible to you that there's a database keeping all your user information. But when you're in a business and you're doing payroll and someone says, hey, we need to pay for better software, you will know, okay, that's probably dealing with issues regarding databases. And if you're dealing with anything technical at all or with the payroll, say you're working in the accounting department, maybe you're not the techie there, but you want to make sure someone in your department, one of the techies, is doing that backup because this data is so important. And with your just a little amount of experience here with Access, you'll be familiar with just what goes into a database. You're not going to be a database expert, but you'll be a step ahead of someone who has never seen Access. And when people talk about databases, they'll be foggy. You'll have some familiarity. So let's go back to our projects then. And we're dealing with the importing of data into our access problem on, this is the homework problem 72-2. So let me open mine, and I'll also open up the page of the book that describes how we're going to be importing the data. So I'll bring up the book page. And remember what we did. We actually spent more time in Excel just getting the data ready to import into Access. So actually, I'm going to open up Excel first. Let me find Excel. Where'd Excel go? I guess I'll have to find it. Excel. It's got to spell it right. And I'll go to that recent Excel file, which was the mums, right? It was the mums landscaping file. And while it's doing that, I'll bring the book. It was your turn, that's right, your turn 1-2, mums landscaping. Remember what we did there? We got our data ready to import into Access. Here we had all the information. And from this information, I can see that I'm going to have customers in a customer table that refer to a supervisor. And I'm going to have supervisors. And if I look through the list of supervisors, I see that there are really only 3 supervisors and these are going to go into a separate related supervisor table. So now I have my supervisors arranged, deleted all the duplicate supervisor names. I have my customers without any information except supervisor number in there. And now I'm going to go to Access and import from this file copy of your turn. So make sure if you're in Excel, you save that to a place where you're going to be able to find it from Access, because we can't just copy paste. Although copy pasting sort of works, it doesn't give us our headers nicely. It'll just paste the data. So we want to import this nice and carefully into a new table. And to do the import, we need to know where this file is. So now I'm going to go to Access, and I don't know why Excel is opening again, and import from that your turn mums landscaping. I'm going to close the file in Excel because sometimes I have problems. If Excel has it open, it won't let go of it and let the other file use it. So I'm going to close Excel, and I'm going to bring up Access. And bring up the EX72. Oh, I guess I haven't started EX72. So I'm going to start a blank database. I'm going to make sure I'm saving it over in the right place and give it the name, my last name, AC72-2. So I'm going to go to my cs101 folder, keeping things organized by this year. And I'm going to save it as Manning AC72-2. And then create. That creates the shell to hold my tables. It starts me off in a blank table. I don't care about this table because I'm going to import others. So I'm just going to close that table, not saving changes. I don't need a table 1. And I'm going to now go to external data, and I'm going to import data from that spreadsheet. And now I have to browse to where I saved that spreadsheet. There's my copy of your turn that I have modified. I've already organized the data in there. And now I'm going to click Next, or sorry, click OK. And because there are multiple worksheets in there, it shows I can import data from the different places. I don't want to import the data from the original because that has all the data all mashed together. Rather than make a table and then have to go delete those extra columns, I'm going to first of all, import the supervisor data. Click Next. See how any Excel worksheet, it will show each worksheet. It can only import from one worksheet at a time in your Excel data file. And the first row does contain column headings, very handy for me. Sometimes I have to assign them myself. I'd rather let it be assigned. Now, one by one, I check that the data type is reasonable, last name. And notice when it can't figure out that it's a number of some particular type, it chooses short text. That's the most convenient data type. And I can slide over here to see postal code, short text as well, currency, and date time. So it predicts all the correct stuff. I don't have to make any changes here. Then I'd click Next. And I think supervisor number makes a good primary key, so I'm going to choose my own primary key, and it jumps to the first column, supervisor number. So that's a good primary key. And then I click Next. Supervisor is a good name for my table, so I click Finish.
What's the primary key?
Supervisor number. But choose your own. It's the very first one. And I don't need to save import steps. And now I can double click on my supervisor table and see what it looks like. Now remember in the book how we adjusted our field sizes? I'm not going to make you do that for this one. I think it's the most important thing to remember is you can import into tables to start your database. And this is such a small database, we don't need to worry about the wasted space. You're welcome to, if you want, to go to Design View if you want to adjust your field sizes, but I'm not requiring it. Okay, so I can close that table then. And I adjusted a column, so it's asking me to save. I want to save changes. Now I go import another one. I want to import my customer data. So I go to external data and do it all over again from the same file. But this time, the customer worksheet in my spreadsheet. And again, I have column headings. And let's check the data type again this time. The most important one to check will be that supervisor number. We want to make sure that that is the same data type as in the other table. If it's not the same data type, they won't be able to be related. So yes, it is short text. I want it to be short text because that's what it is in the supervisor table. If we're number in one and text in the other, when you go try to relate the two, it'll say, sorry, data type mismatch, in a very unhelpful error message, all because this wasn't the same data type. Choose my own primary key again, and that would be customer numbers. Makes a perfect primary key. One thing to remember, if it's asking for a primary key, it has to be something that is unique to every record. So postal code would be a bad primary key because it's not unique to a record. Telephone number is possibly a primary key, but I may have two people with the same corporate phone number listed here, so that would make it not a good primary key. So the thing is, it needs to be unique to every record in your table. And that's, from what we can tell, that's a decent primary key, because customer number should be unique to every customer. Then I click Next, and I have my two tables, and I don't need to save import steps. So now I have two tables. Let's go ahead and double click my customer table. And it's all been, I can see that it's all been successfully imported. If I click on each field, I can see the field size and short text, just like what we saw in Design View. Or I can go to Design View and see my fields that were defined as I did the import. We're going to be doing more with properties like validation rules and text in a later project, but I don't need to make any of these changes. Let's just make sure about that. I'm going to look at the book page for this just to make sure that they don't specifically tell me I have to do something. So here's the instructions. Let me enlarge that a bit for you. Here's the instructions for the homework. You They've got a workbook. Each customer assigned a new supervisor. All they want us to do is use the concepts and techniques presented in this chapter, design and create a database to store the data that mums needs. Okay, submit your assignment in the format specified by your instructor. Okay, so going back to my database, I have a customer table. I can look at datasheet view, see the information. I'm going to adjust my columns just to make it nicely viewable. I don't need the postal code to be so wide. Supervisor number doesn't need to be very wide. So there we have a database. It's ready for queries. Looking at the supervisor table again, I'll adjust my columns there just to make it more convenient as I look through my customers to have the data not spread out all across the page. And when I close it, I can save changes to my adjustments in columns. Now, just for practice here, remember how we can create those other 3 types of objects? We have our tables. Let's go ahead and click on the customer table. We're going to use the 3-click method. Click the table, click create, and let's create a form. Just click form. That lets me have a user-friendly way of browsing through my customer table. That creates this lovely form. Now, the Access experts will go back and design the form and make changes. You don't need to do that. Just create the form and close it, saving changes, and the form name of customer is perfectly fine. Let's do the same thing for supervisor. Click supervisor, click create, and click form to make a form for browsing supervisor information. And I can use the little arrow keys to browse my 3 supervisors. And I can close it and save it as supervisor form. Now I want to create a report of the information. Same thing, click on the table, customer, create, and let's click the simple create a basic report on that information. There's my report of my customers. I'm going to adjust my columns there because I don't know why it spreads that out so far. Make it a little easier. Maybe it'll print out on one page. Look how they stretch that phone number so far out. There we go. We can almost make it fit on one page. And I zoom over here. I guess I'm not going to make the whole thing fit on one page. But that's good enough. I have a report, decent looking report. Question? I just click on the top row cell and then I can grab the edge. I have to be in report view. Looks like you're looking at are you looking at the table or the report?
Yeah, I get a report on the table or the form?
The report on the table.
Customer.
And then report. And then just clicking there, I can adjust my columns. Just like I can adjust the columns of the table itself, making my report a little easier to adjust. I just click on the top cell in a column, not the actual title. That doesn't let me adjust the width. Oh, I guess it does let me adjust the width. So I can click there or there. This is what we call layout view. Just get a little familiar with browsing the report. Once you've made a few adjustments, go ahead and close the report, saving changes. Customer report is the fine name for the report. See how it's, even though it's called customer, it's a report, so it shows up in the report section. Let's do the same thing for supervisor. Click supervisor, click create, click report, and adjust some columns a little bit. Click the column, adjust its width. So all we're learning here is a little bit of how we can manipulate a report. Remember, it's just a 3-click method to generate the report. And this one I did get to fit on one page. I see the dotted line that are showing me this is fitting on one page. And I'm adjusting my columns just a bit. The title can get messed up. I'll adjust that out a little bit more. There we go. And now I can close it, save and change it. Control S would also ask me, do I want to save it? I'm just going to give it the same report supervisor. Don't worry about queries. We're going to be doing lots of queries in the next chapter, so I'm not going to make you do queries. Oh, I'm going to adjust this guy. I see this guy got a little narrow. I'm going to adjust that so I can see that hourly rate summed up. And closing it, saving changes. Once you have the two tables, the customer and supervisor form, customer supervisor report, then you're done with AC72. I'm going to do one thing just for fun. I'm going to edit the properties, and I'm going to put, just so I remember, assignment for cs101 spring 2016. Whenever I change the properties, it doesn't ask me, do I want to save? It's already saved in the database. So now I can close access or go back to my original table. I'm going to close access because I'm done with this database. Oh, and let me show you one thing that is confusing about access. It's having to do with Windows. It's kind of an annoying thing with Windows. When I have this file open in Windows, let me browse over to the place where I have this file, and let me show you what shows up where I have the file. While Access has it open, I go to Documents, where my file is, and I see AC72-2 file, and if I am viewing, sometimes I'll see an extra file laying around. Maybe I have to have hidden files viewed here. Let's show. I am showing extensions. Let's see if there's, let me show by name here. Sort by name. Where is it? Oh, it's not showing. Sometimes there's this extra little file laying around called a lock file. It shows LACCDB. I'm not seeing the lock file. Sometimes that's hanging around to confuse you. So whenever you're uploading, make sure you upload the ACCDB file, not a LACCDB file. That occasionally happens. People get confused because it has an access icon. When I close the access database, that lock file goes away. For some reason, I'm not seeing it here. So looking at the assignment requirements, we have created a database for Mums Landscaping. It's ready for them to use to add queries to. That's what we'll be doing in chapter AC2. Any questions about that particular one? You've got the file, you uploaded it, it's working. It's working for you, Esther?
I'm getting there.
Okay. So we're then ready to start AC2. And the nice thing about AC2 is it just builds on what we've done with AC1. We don't have to start with a new database. We can build on what we've done. So chapter 2 is all about learning about building queries into our database, asking questions about that data. And from that video, you saw how that data is so important. Our data is just in these test databases is just a tiny database. But we're learning what needs to be done by a company if they actually have a full-scale database. And Access can be a good tool for managing personal data, just so you, again, are familiar with what can be done. So let's go right into, first of all, getting our AC2 project ready. Here's how we work with chapter 2. We go start Access. if you don't already have access, and find your AC1 database. And what you're going to do is open the AC1 database and do a save as. So I'm going to go to my AC1 database, and I'm going to do a file, save as, save database as, and then down here, save as. It's kind of a goofy save as. It gives multiple steps. Because remember, since I may have a database with objects, it gives me a choice. Are you saving this object or are you saving the database? I am saving the database, and I'm doing a save as, and I'm just giving it a new name. Instead of my last name AC1, I'm changing that to last name AC2, putting it over in my Documents cs101 folder, along with all my other assignments. For you, this should be on a jump drive or someplace on your PC, but you're still backing it up to Google Docs or something. Manning AC2 is my file name. Now it has that new name. And whenever I see this, I always want to check Enable Content. Don't just close that. You do want it to be enabled. And now we're ready to proceed with building queries about our data. Okay, so you've got it saved as AC2. You ready to go? Here we go. The book explains queries, how we get information out of them. Here's a little picture of all the people who need to access our database. And remember in that little video, this cannot be done if you're sharing an Excel file. It gets just chaotic if multiple people are accessing data from an Excel file. But from the database, you can do that. Multiple departments can get at the data. It's backed up on the server. You can, and then when you use it, your database programmers are learning to build queries that get the right information for what you need. Like for the shipping people, they know where the package is in inventory, where to find it, and where to ship it to, how much it weighs, all that stuff. So we're going to use the Create Query wizard, and we're going to build a query about our customers. Okay, so here's how we build a query about our customers. Go back to Access, click the customer table, create, and we're going to use Query Design, not the Query Wizard this time. We're going to use Query Design, and basically we need to tell it what information is in what table that I need to query. Well, our first query is about customers. Double-click the customer table and then close. I only need one table here, and I can grab it and spread it out so I can see all the fields that are in it. And then let's see what information I want to query about. So we want to get information from the customer table. And now we need to know what fields do we care about. Well, we want to get information in this particular query about customer number, name, amount paid, and current due. It's hard to read there, but so I'll go back here and adjust it. I want information about customer number. I want that to appear down here. To get it to appear down here, I just double click and it shows up is something that's going to be displayed. So customer number, double click customer name, double click amount paid, and double click current due. What that is telling Access is show information from that table when I run this query. Now to run the query, I can click exclamation point. I just like to go right to datasheet view. It does the same thing. It runs the query and shows me the results. So I click view. This shows me just that information that I've asked for, that I've queried for. So what I see in this columns here matches the columns I request down here in the query design. That easy enough to see? I'm trying to go slow here because this kind of gets confusing after we start thinking about criteria. Do I have any criteria set here? In the criteria row, there are no criteria, which means show everything regardless of criteria. But the criteria is actually the power of Access. And let's see, now we're thinking about criteria. We haven't added anything yet. they mention that if I wanted to specify criteria, I type something in that criteria row. So our first example that we're going to save is looking for the information only about customer CSU10. So to find information about customer CSU10, in the criteria I put CSU10. If I hit enter, I'll see something strange happen. I'll see quotes appear around what I just typed. That's fine. That's Access telling us that's how it likes to see it. When I'm comparing something to short text, it wants to put quotes around it. To see whether I do get the information, if I've typed the criteria right, I go back to datasheet view of this query, and there I see only that customer show up. The reason that customer showed up is because I said only show me, what this criteria means is show me the data where this matches in customer number. That is our first query. We are going to save that query based on the page number we found it on. So we're going to save this query as, and I have to see my page number, as AC81. So I Control S to save the query this time. It's going to ask me a name, and I'm going to call it AC81. So every time you save your query, just put the page number that appeared on. And then I click OK. And now, when you submit your assignment, I'll see that you completed query on page AC81. And to see how you did it, if it's closed, I can just right-click on it, Design View, and I can see how you designed that query. If I just double-click on it, it shows me the data that query produces. All right, let's go on to our next query, unless there's questions about that one.
What was the criteria?
The criteria was CSU10. I can go back to mine and verify CSU10, and it will show quotes around it. Okay, and I can close it just to keep my life in Access less cluttered. I like to close things that I'm done with. And you'll find Access complaining about some things you try to do. It'll say, there is an object open for that table, and it'll be all nasty error messages. So close them when you're done is the best thing to do. Now the next query is after talking about how you can open them, they talk about using wildcards. We want to look for customers that have a name that begin with the letter S. So this is where wildcards come in. I'm going to start a new query just to get comfortable with building queries. Again, on Customer Table, Create, Query Design, double-click Customer Table, and Close. Same information, name, number, amount paid, current due. Number, name, amount paid, current due. The criteria this time is down in the customer name. I'm looking for a customer that starts with letter S and has something or maybe nothing after it. Asterisk stands for anything or nothing. So their name, rarely could I find a customer with name S, but maybe they just wanted to have a very short name. It would find them. When I view datasheet of this query, I will see that, oh, there's the two customers whose name began with the letter S. So going back to our little notes here, the basic notes about wildcards, there's only two wildcards we pretty much use. Asterisk can be anything or nothing. So the things that would match S star could be S, S, Stephen, anything that had something after it. It would not match thinking of a name with S in the middle of it. What's a name with S in the middle? Esther. It would not match Esther because it doesn't begin with S. Since I don't have a star before S, it has to begin with S. Another wildcard is the question mark. One character. It has to match one character, And so if I did something like question mark S star, that would match anything that had the second letter as S. So it would match Esther. Would it match Sally? Nope, because the question mark means there has to be a character there. Whereas a star S star would match Sally. Because this asterisk can match nothing being there. So remember, if I'm looking for an S anywhere in the name, I would have to use star S star. All right, that's enough of wildcards. Let's go on with another query. No, we'll finish right there. We're out of time. We'll stop there. Next time, we'll be going over more queries.
What's the query?
I'm going to give this query name. Let's see what page we're on. We're on page AC83, so we'll call it AC83. So Control S, AC83. Close the database, save it to your jump drive, upload it to Google Docs, or you can even upload it to the eLearn assignment because you can always delete and replace that in the assignment. So that's also a valid place to keep a backup. And you have a wonderful day.